Hello and welcome to my favourite books read in 2020, in which I'm going to do exactly what it says on the tin, tell you about all the best books that I read in 2020. It was a process doing this because I read 122 books last year, and so I went for a spreadsheet of them all. I downloaded my data from Goodreads and then filtered out all of the ones which it had actually recorded the date read for. That wasn't 2020, and then had to go manually through the remaining ones because apparently marking a book as read on a particular date on your phone and actually putting in the started and finished dates isn't enough for Goodreads to actually log this. Anyway, long process, went through it, was actually surprised at some of the books that I actually read in 2020. I thought I had read some of them in 2019, but you know, yeah, I definitely did because these ones actually did have a read date on them. But I was still surprised, but let's be honest, it felt like about 5 years crammed into 1 year, so that's probably why. Yeah, so so I then went through that list and I eliminated all those that I didn't think were of a high enough standard, like straight away, and then I was left with about 33 books, and I went through and I sort of marked whether I thought they were first tier or second tier, like in my top books, and then I discounted all the second tier and I looked through, and then I moved a couple more that I'd initially put in the first tier down to the second tier because I didn't think they were on a par with the other books in the list. And yeah, I was left with 13 books. Now, I'm a book reviewer who tries to review books for what they are. So I review a book by how good it is at what it's trying to be, you know? So like, for instance, I'll review a YA thriller based on how good it is at being a YA thriller, and I'll review a classic against the standards of other classics. You know, does it hold up to that? I'll read a romance and think, how good is this at being a romance? You know, does it fit the genre conventions? Does it do anything new and exciting? Does it make me feel the things a romance should feel? You know, that kind of thing. So this is a mixed genre list. And it's not to say that all of the books are as great and worthy and, you know, 100% objectively on a par with each other, but subjectively I loved them all and they were great at what they were trying to do. And yeah, I can't imagine reviewing a book any other way. I've always got to look at what that book, you know, was sold to me as. Does it live up to those expectations, and does it do what it should do for that genre or type of book, you know? So yeah, I have some stats for you before I get into telling you what the books are. So, as I said before, I read 122 books in 2020 and I got my best books down to 13. 10 of those books are novels, 2 are short story anthologies, and 1 is a non-fiction book. There were some short story collections that I read throughout the year, which I really, really did love. But compared to the anthologies, they just, you know, they didn't blow me away to the same level. And I don't know whether that's because authors put their best work in anthologies, whether it's because the editor had a really good eye and brain for good stories. You know, I don't know, but that's the way it worked out. That's the way it worked out. And there's one non-fiction book on the list as well. Out of all the books that are on this list, 2 were published in 2020. I'm not very good at reading books in the year that they came out. I did actually read a fair few. It was pushed up by the number of Christmas books that I read at the end of 2020 that were from NetGalley, so came out that year. 8 were published in the last decade, 2 in the noughties, the 2000s, and 1 in 1922. So yeah, that's my stats. So let's talk about books, and I'm going to start with the short story collections because I just felt like it. So the 2 on my list are Outsiders, edited by Alice Slater, published by Three Cups Press, which is a small press, and Under My Hat, Tales from the Cauldron. This is edited by Jonathan Strahan. And this one, Outsiders, I contributed to the pre-order campaign for, and for Under My Hat I've got this free. I think a friend was doing a clear out and I picked it up. So anyway, they're very different books. So this is a adult short story collection, more literary, all based around the theme of outsiders. And this much more chunky volume is a collection of YA stories about magical people, witches, that kind of thing. Anyway, I loved both of them, as very different as they are. Outsiders was absolutely my book of the month in the month that I read it in. I remember actually declaring it as such, and I never declare a book of the month, so that was really unusual. Outsiders I actually read for my short story book club, and we all loved it. And Under My Hat I just read because I was doing a project to read a short story every single day from I think February onwards, or the end of February onwards, I can't remember, last year. Actually still trying to catch up on that project, but you know, the less said about that, the better, the better. So yeah, this is a wide-ranging collection of short stories by different authors, many of them famous. There's also like a Neil Gaiman poem in there. I don't know why he gets to be at the top even though he only contributed a poem, but you know, that's Neil Gaiman for you. It's a big name to draw people in. My favourite story in this collection is by Garth Nix, and I'm still making fan fiction up for it in my head months afterwards, and I really must read some Garth Nix novels. I never have, and I should, based on this. So yeah, that's the two short story collections. Now I'm going to do the non-fiction book before I move on to novels. The non-fiction book is Craft of Use, Post-Growth Fashion, which is an academic book basically about everything that happens to clothes after the fashion industry has done its thing. So that's how people wear clothes, how people repair clothes, how people refashion clothes, all of that kind of thing. And I would give this book like 100 stars just for giving me the term craft of use. I said this when I reviewed it at the time that I read it, that it's just really useful having that term, because I read a lot of books about that kind of thing, and I've never known what to call them before, like what category to put them in, and now I know it's Craft of Use, and I even made a bookshop.org list called Craft of Use. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you can check that out in the description. But yeah, it's a chunky book, but it's got lots of pictures and like kind of testimonials and people talking about items of clothing and how they've, you know, lived with them, engaged in craft of use, that kind of thing. And it's really accessible. So if you're interested in sustainable fashion, or as this book terms it, post-growth fashion, it's definitely one to check out. As I say, it is an academic book, so it's quite expensive. It doesn't actually have a price on it, which is probably a bad sign. I would probably expect it to be no less than £20, to be honest with you, but maybe you could get it from a library, especially if you're a current student. Yeah, it's a shame it's so expensive. Maybe if there's an ebook available, it might be a bit cheaper. But yeah, I really loved it, and I would recommend it if you are interested in this topic. So on to the novels, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. While everybody was reading Girl, Woman, Other, because I could not get Girl, Woman, Other from the library and I wanted an audiobook, I picked this one because I'd wanted to listen to it for years actually. I'd heard about it before, and I thought, you know what, while everyone's talking about her, I will read this, because I knew quite a lot of people reading her back catalogue as well, and I thought, you know, if I have something to talk about when, you know, I have to hide the fact that I haven't read Girl, Woman, Other yet. Hopefully I will get around to reading it in 2021. Have a request in for the audiobook at the moment. So yeah, Mr. Loverman is about an Antiguan gentleman who has been married to his wife for several years, and they have 2 daughters, and he's hiding the fact that he's gay and has been in a relationship with his best friend since they were both young men, essentially. And he decides that this is the year that he's finally going to come clean and leave his wife and move in with his lover. but he chickens out of it, and then he unchickens out of it, and then he chickens out of it again, and and it's a wonderfully beautiful, complicated book that also has some chapters from his wife's point of view, and it's very funny, and he's an incredible narrator as well. And I listened to the audiobook and it was just gorgeous. So yeah, I would really, really recommend it. It's set in the early 2000s, I think. So it's not as like, it's not like bang up to date contemporary. Sorry, this hat is making my head itch a little bit. I think it's because I haven't worn it in ages and my head is just completely unused to this level of mohair. But yeah, it's really, really interesting, dealing with homophobia in black communities as well as the world in general, and the reactions of his daughters, and how basically he's been a pretty dodgy father and husband at the same time as trying his best to be a good father and husband, you know, like it's just the nature of keeping a secret and not being able to be his true self. And so it's, yeah, it's beautiful, it's sad and it's moving, but at the same time it's funny and delightful and charming, and yeah, it just made my life while I was listening to it. The next one on my list is a YA novel, 7 Days by Eve Ainsworth, which came out a long time ago. This is one of the, oh no, 2015, that's not too bad actually. I think in my head, I had imagined it had come out like a decade ago because I got this as a review copy from the publisher and I felt incredibly guilty about the fact I hadn't read it yet. Yeah, this was published by Scholastic, and I think it came out around the same time as The Sin Eater's Daughter by Melinda Salisbury, which I read at the time. And yeah, I did not read this for some reason. I think I just wasn't in a contemporary mood right then. And when I learned a bit more about it, I realised that it's a book about bullying, and I was bullied at school, and it's not a subject that I often can bring myself to read about, because it's a bit close to the bone, and also because I've seen it done badly. You know, I've seen really unrealistic representations of bullying, and as well as, you know, some good ones which are quite hard to read, and this definitely fell into the latter category, but it was absolutely spectacular, and I thought it was handled so well, and it really showed you both sides of the story. So essentially it's about a bully and her victim, a victim and her bully, and 7 days in both their lives. And yeah, so it really, really shows you why the bully does what she does, why the victim is so affected by the bully's actions, why she's basically easy prey, and yeah, it really, really, really shows you both sides in the story brilliantly, and I would strongly recommend it. So the next book on my list is Piglets by Clémentine Bouvet, which is a novel translated by its author, which is about 3 French girls who set out on a utterly ridiculous quest to cycle to Paris to gate crash the president's garden party, and along the way they fund the journey by selling sausages. I feel like I don't want to say any more about it because that description should get you really excited if this is the right kind of book for you. It also involves the narrator like falling in love with one of her new friends' elder brother and being super awkward about it. I'm referring to him as the son in text. There's this whole bit where they go to the town where her favourite cheese is from, just because it's her favourite cheese. It's not really on the way. It's it's just so funny and charming and lovely, and I would really, really recommend it. Next up, because this is the order on my random spreadsheet, and to take a little break from contemporary, I'm going to tell you about the oldest book on this list, and that is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, which was published in 1922, and is about 2 middle-class young wives who are very bored with their lives and fed up with their husbands, but they're very shy kind of retiring types. But one day they're in a club together and they both see this advert for a castle that can be rented for the whole of April in Italy. And they see it and they just, yeah, they hatch this plan to go and to, you know, save some money and, you know, make it more affordable for them. They find 2 other women to go with them. One of them is a young, beautiful aristocrat who is fed up of being beautiful and of all the attention she gets. She just wants to be left alone. And this very grumpy older woman who is obsessed with when she was a child and all of these famous poets and people who used to come to her family home for dinners. And she's very grumpy and also wants to be left alone. And they all go off to this beautiful castle in this spectacular location, and it works its magic on them essentially, and they start to relax and actually talk to each other, and yeah. It's just a really funny, charming, I said this about Piglets, didn't I? I love books that are funny and charming, what can I say? Kind of gentle book. It's like a holiday in a book, basically. It's kind of a close examination of 4 very different women and, you know, what it means to be those type of women and whether they're really, you know, tied to these roles. And yeah, I mean, it's not as serious. It's The Enchanted April. It's a lot of fun and I would recommend it. Next on my list is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, which is a it's a novel in verse, and it's absolutely beautiful, this book. It's got sort of bits of illustration and kind of interesting formatting. And yeah, it's just lovely. It's absolutely lovely. It's about a young gay mixed race boy growing up and discovering drag and going to university, and it's just lovely. It's a really quick read and it's beautiful and the poems are lovely and I would really recommend it. There's not really much else to say other than that. Next up is a book that I actually did read in print copy, but I passed on to a neighbour, which I kind of regret now. At the time, I sort of finished the book and I was like, well, I really enjoyed that. I loved it even, but I don't think I'll want to ever read it again. So I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. And now I kind of regret that. I wish I had kept it maybe to pass on to friends and family members to encourage them to read it. But also I think a lot of people have read it already because it was a prize-winning book that came out a while ago. And that is 26A by Diana Evans. So it's about 2 British Nigerian girls, twins, who live in a house in London with their older sister and their younger sister and their parents, who have a very strange sort of marriage where they don't seem to get on very well. And they live in the UK and then they live in Nigeria for a couple of years. Is it a couple of years or just 1 year? I can't remember. It's a while. And then they come back and they grow up and they become adults and make different choices and sort of drift apart whilst also staying very close. And the ending is just, oh, it's really sad and it's really beautiful, and there's a bit of kind of magical psychological stuff going on in there, and it's a really interesting book. Probably not one to read if you're feeling a bit emotionally fragile, because I cried and I still get very sad when I think about it months later, especially knowing that it was kind of based on the author's own life as well. Adds an extra dimension of power to the story. So yeah, I would really recommend that, and I kind of wish I'd held on to it to lend to people, but yeah, it came out quite a long time ago now, so I suspect that a lot of people will have already read it, but if you haven't read it, definitely add it to your list to check out. Next up is The Dragonfly Pool by Eva Ibbotson. I'd previously read Journey to the River Sea by this author and absolutely loved it. And I have since then acquired probably most of Eva Ibbotson's children's books, and a couple of her ones which were like published for adults at the time and then republished as YA later on. So yeah, I have quite a few of her books to read, and I sort of save them for when I really need a pick-me-up. And this was just an absolute delight. I honestly think this is one of the best children's books ever written, like Journeys to the River Sea, which I, had the same opinion of. And if only this had been around when I was a kid, I know I would have loved it to pieces. It would have been absolutely battered book. So yeah, it's about a young girl in the sort of the lead up to World War II. Her father's a doctor, and one day one of his patients offers her a place at his boarding school, and I think she doesn't go to like a particularly good school, so her father decides that she'll go, and there she discovers this completely weird and wonderful atmosphere. It's a very unorthodox school, and she meets some amazing people, and she persuades them that they should go on a school trip to this dance contest in this country in Europe, this made-up country in Europe, Bulgaria. There she meets the Prince of Bulgaria, who is a very, very lonely boy. He's not allowed to do what he wants. He has to take life very seriously, and he just desperately wants a friend. Anyway, she befriends him, and then some Nazis come into his country, try to take it over and kidnap him, and Tally, is that her name? Yes, Tally and her friends from school and all the other kids who are here for this dance contest have to get together and try and rescue him, and it is just delightful. It has everything. It has a boarding school, it has kids like knowing better than adults and coming together, and it has friendship and beauty and fighting the Nazis, although it's set just before World War II, so there's only so much Nazi fighting you can do when you are a child. But yeah, it's absolutely delightful, and I would strongly recommend that you read it, especially if you need cheering up, because it is definitely the book to cheer you up, even though it has some melancholy notes because Nazis. And next on my list, I am moving away from YA and children's books for good for this list, and I have 3 adult books for you. So the first one is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, which is a romance novel about a autistic woman who wants to find a boyfriend so she can get married and have children to make her mum happy, and she's worried that she's really bad at relationships and she doesn't know how to do them properly, and so she hires an escort to help her out. And it's this kind of like what I really like about it is it's the reverse of the typical like woman meets a billionaire trope. This is a wealthy woman who's very good at her job and just is really concerned that she doesn't know how to do romantic relationships, who hires someone to help her out, and yeah, they fall in love. It's it's really hot. Fanning myself, and yeah, it's great and very, very highly recommended by lots of people, and yeah, check it out, especially if you are in the mood for a good, really absorbing, can't put it down romance. And I listened to the audiobook, which was really, really great. The next book on my list is Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which is a total surprise. I kind of picked this out like on a whim from NetGalley. I wasn't 100% sure about it when I requested it, but something about it made me really want to give it a go. And then when I got accepted for it and started reading it, I just got completely absorbed. So this is a book about a writer, right? And I'm very sceptical about books about writers. I often think they're very self-indulgent, and I think really you think that the most exciting thing you could possibly write about is basically yourself. Like sometimes it's done really well. I like books where a character discovers that they're a writer. Books where an author is just kind of chasing their ambition and it kind of becomes a bit of a fantasy. Not so much. So yeah, I kind of like, I went into this with a healthy dose of skepticism, I think, and I absolutely loved it. So the author in question is she's kind of in a difficult place. She's running out of money. She has a job in a restaurant which she takes so that she can write around it, although she's not really writing at the moment. She's kind of drifting in and out of relationships with different men. Her like writing is just completely at a standstill, and it's the 1990s as well, I think, and that adds like a kind of like interesting context to it as well. And yeah, it's just basically kind of about her life and her like trying to figure things out, but also like lacking the momentum and the energy to properly figure things out. And you know, eventually she kind of like gets a handle on her life and how everything's going, and that has impacts for her writing. And yeah, I really liked it, and I would really like to read it again one day, and I am hoping to pick up some of the author's other work soon. Finally, and if somebody was to ask me, Julianne, what was the most fun you had reading this year? It would be this book. I'm hesitant to say that it's my favourite book of the year, because all of these books I've mentioned in this video were just absolutely fabulous in their own way. But if there's one that really was just an all-consuming, brilliant reading experience that just was unlike anything else I had ever read before, and yet somehow everything I had ever wanted in a book at the same time, it was this, and it is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. I had not read anything by Elizabeth Gilbert before. Nothing. And I think this was just an audiobook that I kind of picked at random. Like, it sounded interesting, and it was available, and I wanted something to listen to. And this is kind of early on in the year. And yeah. So I downloaded it and I started listening to it, and oh my god, I was hooked. Like nothing else. I was just completely hooked, completely absorbed, and I loved every flipping minute of this book. Oh my god. So City of Girls is about, I guess it's in like the early 20th century. There's this young woman who's just been like kicked out of college in America, and she gets sent by her disgruntled parents as a kind of punishment to go live with her aunt in New York. Only her aunt owns like a cheap theatre where they like make up plays and stuff like on a really low budget and like have cheap tickets, and she just gets drawn into this utterly bonkers world of women and friendship and love and betrayal. And yeah, the narrator makes some utterly terrible choices, terrible life choices, but she grows up and it's really interesting. And yeah, like a lot of it is set during this young part of her life, but then it carries on as she grows up and she starts to be a bit more independent and does different things with her life. And it's just, oh, it was just a complete dream of a book. And I can't, is there anything else out there like this in the world? I just can't imagine there is. It was just such a unique book. And I know the author has another novel, which I will definitely be checking out. I can't imagine it ever living up to City of Girls. It's just like, yeah. So yeah, that was, if not my favourite book of the year, then definitely the most fun reading experience that I had. It was just a delight from beginning to end, every sentence, even when bad stuff happened and I was full of foreboding and like, oh god, why did you do that kind of feelings. I was loving it every single second. So yeah, and that's the 13th book. That is the end of my list of the best books that I read in 2020. Thank you very much for watching. If you loved any of these books or you're particularly intrigued by any of them, if you want to know anything more about them, do leave me a comment and let me know. Also in 2020 I published my own, well, kind of book. I wrote a novella set during the first couple of weeks of the first UK lockdown, about two women who share a flat in London and do not get on. They have avoided each other up till now, but now they're stuck in all the time. Will they learn to get on? Will they murder each other? Just, you know, read it and find out. Also, from me, that's free, I have an e-course on how to read more books and have more fun doing it. It's called Ignite Your Passion for Reading, Fall in Love with Books, and you can find out the links to that in the description. You'll also find all the links to all of my social media, as well as affiliate links to buy any of the books that I have mentioned. So yeah, that's it. That's my video. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you would like to see more from me. You'll see me again soon. Bye!